Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great Q&A for you today, but before we get in, make sure you come visit us at Gluten Free Society, check out our sponsor, and make sure you check out our products of the week. This week we've got Ultra Digest and as well as a proteolytic enzyme product called Matrizyme, both on sale. Do we have a code for those? Digest. Enter code Digest, and that saves you on checkout. So check out our sponsor, help support us in that way, and let's dive in and answer your questions. I'm going to try to keep this to the enzymes at first, and we'll come back and answer the non-enzymatically related questions. Many of you chiming in how much you enjoyed the interview with Dr. Bastidas. I'm so glad that you did. If you missed that interview, and you want to do a deeper dive on enzymes, I encourage you to check that interview out. You can just click the link below. We'll put a link up for you, and you can watch that full interview there. Let's see, Pam says, wish you would have discussed the difference between raw living food and cooked food enzyme content. Thanks so much. Yeah, so when you eat food, generally speaking, when you eat raw food, depending on the food, depending on the type of enzymes in the food. But for example, I'm going to use pineapple as an example, because cooked pineapple, when you cook the pineapple, you denature many of the natural enzymes in the food. And so they are less activated and less active. And so eating it raw, actually you'll get more of that enzymatic benefit. And this is true of many fruits and vegetables that contain enzymes. The cooking process can denature the proteins. Remember, enzymes are proteins, and so cooking can denature them. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean cooking food is bad or unnecessary in some cases. It's better to cook the food. But some plants have natural enzymes that by eating them raw, you walk away with a greater benefit. Papaya and pineapple are two very perfect examples of that. As a matter of fact, many of the enzymes that we encapsulate and use in our products are pineapple and papaya based because these enzymes are so powerful. What happens when starch gives sickness? What happens when starch gives sickness? So Erica's asked a question, I guess, about the auto brewery process. So when you have an overgrowth of abnormal bacteria or fungal microorganisms in your GI tract, and especially depending on which types, but many of them are fermenters. They ferment carbohydrate starches. And so when you overconsume carbohydrate starches, you feed these microorganisms a lot. And one of the byproducts of overfeeding these microorganisms is, number one, they get stronger, and number two, they actually produce alcohol as a result of fermenting the carbohydrate starch that you just fed them. Sometimes referred to as auto brewery. Think of it as having a wine factory living inside of you, even if you don't drink. This is why so many people who excessively consume sugars and carbohydrates, starchy carbohydrates, have health issues. Their guts are wine factories. If you've heard the term beer belly, where the beer belly is coming out, right? This is not fat. This is actually gas from a fermentation process. So hopefully, Erica, that helps you understand that a little bit better. Let's see here. Can enzymes on an empty stomach cause diarrhea? Generally, no, Doris. Enzymes on an empty stomach, so part of it depends on the person. As a general rule, I would say no, but some people actually are allergic to where the enzymes come from. And so, again, I'm going to use pineapple, simple example. Let's say you're allergic to pineapple and you took a bunch of pineapple enzyme. You could get diarrhea, potentially, yes. But as a general rule, if you're not allergic to the origin ingredients, then no, enzymes on an empty stomach generally do not cause diarrhea. Now, what enzymes can do, depending on the type, a lot of people in their GI tracts have, let's just say, excessive film and mucoid plaquing or biofilm plaquing. And so enzymes can break that stuff up. And so what can happen is that can stimulate a bowel movement. You might see a bunch of odd things coming out in your stool. A lot of people will see mucolytic plaques or strings coming out of their stool after using enzymes on an empty stomach for the first time. and they mistake them as parasites. So they look at them and they look long and kind of mucousy and stringy, and those are, generally those are not parasites. Those are actually mucus plaques or strings, and enzymes can break them off, and in doing so can stimulate a bowel movement. So that might be a source of not so much diarrhea, but just of let's just say unrecognized or untoward stool content. Let's see, Linda's asking, can you expand, can you expand on how it can help people on blood thinners? I really don't want to take this drug for AFib, but was prescribed it after a stroke. So, it's always best to talk to your doctor. So I don't want you to construe this as medical advice, but enzymes, depending on what kind you're taking, and there are a number of different kinds, proteolytic enzymes, lumbrokinase, serratiopeptidase. These types of enzymes are what are called fibrinolytic enzymes. They break down fibrin. Now, what is fibrin? Fibrin is the stuff in your bloodstream that can cause aggressive clumping or clotting. And so these enzymes naturally degrade excessive fibrin, and by doing so can actually improve blood flow and blood viscosity. Now, if the reason that you have had a stroke is because your blood is so thick that it's excessively clotting, then an enzyme might be indicated for you, but you don't just want to dismiss what your conversation with your doctor and just take an enzyme and hope for the best. Because if you've already had a stroke especially, you just definitely don't want to have another one. Now, that being the case, there are tests that you can also have done. You can talk with your doctor about these tests, that they give you an idea of the properties of your blood that might help you understand how to best approach or how to best make decisions to approach it. So what are some of those tests? One of them is called prothrombin time. And so prothrombin time is a very typical test that many doctors will use to kind of help understand how quickly your blood is clotting. Another one is just your general clotting time, something called INR. Fibrinogen is a really good test to run, as well as D-dimer, which is a protein that, when present, signifies increased clotting potential of the blood. And then C-reactive protein, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, MMP are all good tests to have a greater understanding of the clotting potential and the inflammation factors in your blood that would increase the risk for a stroke or heart attack or excessive clotting. And understanding these tests is really the key to saying, what is it that I can do better in my diet and my lifestyle? We see all the time people with, for example, with high C-reactive protein and erythrocyte sedimentation rate and high fibrinogen. We see diet change normalize those things. Going gluten-free is a perfect example of a diet change that I have seen create vastly different outcomes for people at greater risk for heart attacks and strokes, because inflammatory diets increase inflammatory chemicals in the blood, which increases the risk of clotting, which increases the risk of an event. So again, change your diet and lifestyle, and you may not need all the different medications, but don't just hope for the best. It's best to have these tests done and to be diligent and have that conversation with your doctor so that you can monitor the rheological properties of your blood without just hoping that everything's going to work out. Let's see. Julia's asking about breast implants a factor in autoimmune disease. Yes, they can be. There's a whole field of science on breast implants and other surgical implants as being driving forces or factors behind the development of certain types of autoimmune disease. So it's definitely something that is connected. Leah is asking about my opinion on colostrum to help with healing the gut and celiacs. The question being in regards to cross-reactivity with dairy and gluten. So it's a great question, Leah. And I've got I've got a couple different opinions on this. I think some celiacs can tolerate colostral products just fine. Some can't. That's just been my experience. And part of the theory behind that is that yes, there's a cross reactivity from dairy. This is one of the reasons why we have two different kinds of products with the similar properties. One, we have a product called autoimmune IgG, and it is a colostrum-derived product. I really like colostrum for people who can tolerate the dairy. But we have one that's not got any dairy at all in it as well, because recognizing that so many celiacs will react to that dairy. And that product is called Immune Shield. Now they're very comparable. One is colostrum-based, the other is serum-derived growth factors. So it's a serum-derived product that is dairy-free, but it's from cows. So they're both from cows. One's from milk and one's from the blood. But if you're reactive to the dairy, that's another option. Okay. I've seen content creators say that heavy metals can cause autoimmune issues like Hashimoto's, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis. Have you heard of this, and do you have a video on metals detox? Did we do it? I think we just did a video not too long ago on heavy metals. Maybe we can put a link up to that. But yeah, autoimmune disease, there's 4 categories of triggers for autoimmune disease if you want to kind of simplify this in your mind. The first category is food. Can be a trigger for autoimmunity. The second category is chemicals. Now there's pesticides and dyes and preservatives and additives, all kinds of chemicals in processed food, but heavy metals are a chemical. A number of the cosmetics contain chemicals that people react to. Plastic water bottles contain chemicals that people can react to and can be a trigger. So chemicals as a whole, and metals being part of that, definitely can play a role and can be a trigger. The third trigger is microbial imbalance. So imbalances of the growth of microorganisms in or on the body. And classic example in autoimmunity is Candida albicans. It's a type of mold, or yeast rather, that can definitely be a trigger for an autoimmune process. There are other bacteria that can do it as well. Parasites can do that. They're all microbes, right? And then the fourth trigger is nutritional deficiency. Most well-studied nutrient deficiency linked to autoimmune disease arguably is vitamin D deficiency. And we have epidemic levels of vitamin D deficiency in our country because everybody's inside now. Everybody's been taught to fear the sun, to run away from the sun, out of fear of skin cancer, which is total nonsense. Sun burning causes cancer. Sunshine creates health. So it's a dose issue. But anyway, food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the triggers for autoimmune disease, so metals being a part of that, hopefully that's helpful for you. If epigenetic is true, why do doctors say that chronic disease cannot be cured? I don't know. I can't speak for other doctors and why they would say that. I think it's probably just a position of not understanding chronic conditions. I mean, if we look at medicine's attempt to treat chronic health conditions and the success rate. You've got, and we just take a few examples: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity. These are chronic diseases. Autoimmune disease, chronic disease. What's the success rate of medicine's track record in treating those conditions? Now, when I say treating, I don't mean success record of treating, because the success rate of treating is quite broad. I mean, medicine is very commonly used to treat those conditions. So we could say arguably that 99% of people in industrialized countries seek medical treatment when they have a chronic condition. But what is the success rate of the outcome? Not what is the success rate of it actually happening, but what's the success rate of the outcome? And I can speak for the U.S. We have the poorest, lowest track record in terms of outcomes for the treatment of chronic degenerative diseases of all industrialized countries. We have a horrible track record. And so in my opinion, drugs don't solve illness. Drugs mask symptoms. And you can treat a person's chronic illness by treating the symptoms of the chronic illness and suppressing them, but you're not actually solving the problem. So to answer your question, doctors don't have a great understanding about root cause of where illness comes from. They dismiss diet and lifestyle as the predominant factors involved in chronic disease. But the reality is diet and lifestyle are 99% chronic disease. And if you don't address those two things aggressively and realistically, then no amount of medicine in the world is going to do anything except for mask your symptoms. In some cases, not even mask your symptoms, but in most cases, medicine's polypharmacy, which is when doctors prescribe more than one medicine to the same patient, is the third leading cause of death. So, if chronic degenerative disease is the number one cause of death and the third leading cause of death is the way that most doctors treat it, then I think we have a problem, right? So anyway, hopefully that helps you. I can't speak for other doctors, but I can speak from my own observations. Okay, so we got, what's my opinion on Nuka Chiropractic, and is it better, or is it a long process to feel better after it? Achy, fatigue, headaches, etc. How many times should a person do it? So that's a very kind of personalized question. I think chiropractic care is great, including Nuka, but I think chiropractic care, my uncle was a chiropractor as well. I have a chiropractic degree also. And, my uncle used to say, chiropractic doesn't work as well anymore. He would comment that frequently when I was a kid growing up, and his answer to that was nutrition, largely because he made the correlation, as many have, that poor nutrition, poor diet, poor choices lead to inflammation in the body. And when you're relying on a chiropractic adjustment, whether it's Nuka or any other philosophical type of chiropractic care, the body is only going to respond to the adjustment in a manner that's consistent with the health of the current musculoskeletal system. So like if your muscles are constantly tight because you have a magnesium deficiency, if your muscles are atrophied and imbalanced because you have a sedentary style of work or job, all the chiropractic care in the world isn't going to fix you unless you fix those things too. Where chiropractic care works extremely well is when you have a consistent lifestyle and diet that's congruent to your health, and you seek chiropractic help, and in combination the two can be very effective at helping you overcome a hurdle. But chiropractic by itself, with bad diet and poor choices in lifestyle, is not going to be a tremendous success for anyone in my experience. I mean, there are rare occasions where that might be wrong, but as a general rule of thumb, you cannot establish health through passive therapies. What's a passive therapy? A passive therapy is any type of therapy, whether it be chiropractic, massage, acupuncture. Passive therapy is prescription medications because the drugs are doing the work, not the body. Supplements are passive therapies. There's a lot of passive therapies. Passive therapies, basically, if we summarize all the passive therapies, it means you don't do the work. Well, anytime you rely on passive therapies, you're never going to heal. Passive therapies are adjuvants to you doing the work. So if you're doing the work, many passive therapies can help that work better, but without the work, nobody gets better. And that's part of the reason why the philosophy and the focus of the practice that I have is largely based on diet and lifestyle first. Those have to come first above all other things, because no other form of passive therapy is going to work if you're not changing your behavior. Let's see here. I bought your collagen powder. When does someone know if they need to supplement with collagen? Does it help with joint pain or muscle pain? It can. One of the things that we do to help understand whether or not collagen as a protein supplement would be beneficial or helpful is by checking a person's nutritional status through laboratory evaluation, and you can get a good idea of their protein and amino acid composition and counts, and so helping make that decision. Now, beyond testing, there's no danger in taking collagen, and it's a great protein source. that most people don't get in their standard diets, because collagen predominantly, and if you're looking at mine, for example, a lot of that collagen in my collagen product comes from parts of the animal that humans just typically don't eat. You don't get a lot of collagen from eating the meat or the muscle tissue of the animal, where that collagen is. For example, the chicken comb, right? Who eats chicken combs as a course of food in their diet? Who does that? The bone as well, the cartilage lining of wraps around the bone. These are all things that typically people don't eat anymore. But those cartilage ingredients and those collagen ingredients in those tissues can be extremely helpful and nourishing. Magnesium. I bought your magnesium pills. Is this great to take for thigh muscle fatigue and weakness? For muscle fatigue, there's a lot of reasons why the muscle might fatigue. If your muscles are generally fatigued, there could be a mitochondrial disorder, in which case magnesium can be very helpful in those situations. However, there are other reasons why a muscle can be fatigued, and there are other nutrients that can help with that. I mean, one of the probably if you're just out there, because these are great questions, if you're out there wondering, okay, I'm trying to figure out what kinds of supplements might be helpful for me to take. Of course, there are, for every person, there's a deep dive of uniqueness that would have to happen. We're actually working on that right now at Gluten Free Society. We're working on a quiz that you can take that's going to help push you toward different products that would be more beneficial for you as a unique person. But it's hard for me to answer that for everyone watching the show. But pay attention, because that quiz, I think we're rolling it out next week as a resource for you. But check out our gluten essentials pack, which is a mixture of different things. When I generally say if you could only take a few things, whether it was all you could afford, or maybe you don't swallow pills very well, or whatever the reason, let's say you could only take a few things, what would be the top recommendations I would have for overall general health? Again, this is outside of making the right diet and lifestyle changes, because those have to come first. I would say check out our gluten-free essentials pack, but a good multivitamin, right? So my recommendation there is Ultra Nutrients, a high-quality combo omega-3. Most people that take omega-3s today are taking a DHA supplement. DHA is only half of omega-3. There's another type of omega-3 called EPA, and you want to take a nice mixture of EPA and DHA. So in that regard, Omega Max would be what I would recommend. And then again, just talking about generalized supplementation, a probiotic. And so Biotic Defense would be the one that I would recommend in that case. But again, we're talking about just generalized, not health condition specific. But those three things are great places to start. When do we need to take digestive enzymes? Before, during, or after each meal? So if you're taking digestive enzymes to digest your food, Christina, ideally you want to take them about 10 minutes before you start eating. Now, let's say you forget and you're 2 bites into your meal and you remember, take them. They'll still work. We're talking about an ideal world versus not. So ideally you take them about 10 minutes before you eat, but if you remember in the middle of the meal, you can still take them. They're still going to be effective. Do so. If you remember right after the meal, you take your last bite and you're like, oh, I forgot to take my enzymes. Take them at that moment. What you don't want to do if you're trying to digest your food is take those enzymes an hour later or 2 hours later. They're not going to have the same kind of effect that you're wanting to on your digestion. So either 10 minutes before, during, or right after. Those 3 windows are all acceptable windows, and in that order, as far as the best order, right? Before the meal would be best, in the middle of the meal would be the second best, and then right at the end of the meal would be third best, and then an hour or longer after meal, you're going to get the benefit maybe of the proteolytic enzymes and their anti-inflammatory effects, but you're not going to help you digest your food. Why would popping your neck cause a nosebleed? That's a good question. I don't know that I have an exact answer for it, Terry. I guess what I would have to see is a video of how you're popping your neck or who's popping your neck and how they're positioning your head. Because as a general rule of thumb, that doesn't happen and shouldn't happen. Now, there could be other variable reasons as to why your nose might be bleeding, and so a force of a manipulation might come into effect there. Like there are some people, for example, that have extremely fragile capillaries in their nose, and so any rapid or quick movement could cause a rupture in that way. And so that some people actually go to the doctor and get those arteries or capillaries rather, get them singed, right? They have them surgically singed so that the nose bleeding will quit. And you may have an issue like that. And so where I would start is looking more, instead of thinking maybe the popping is what's causing the nose bleeding, I would look more at the integrity of those capillaries and maybe look at doing some things like vitamin C with bioflavonoids, things like quercetin, because those nutrients are very nourishing to capillaries and to arteries. They help strengthen and support the strength of the lining of them. And so you might have deficit in those nutrients that are leading to that, to that easily rupturing of those capillaries in your nose. Would peanuts trigger celiac? I'm reacting to so much food now. So generally peanuts aren't going to trigger per se celiac, but yes, they also could. And if we think about this intelligently, so many people think that celiac disease can only be caused by gluten. What is celiac disease? Celiac disease is defined as when you do a biopsy of the small intestine, you see something called villus atrophy, which is basically a destruction of the folds of the villi in the small intestine. And that can cause malabsorption of vitamins and minerals, and it can make a person very sick. Leaky gut comes with that, etc. Now, gluten does that, and that's what celiac disease is. But what else can cause villus atrophy? Can other foods cause it? Well, yes, we know that we've had studies and research that show that dairy can cause it. We've seen studies and research that show that soy can cause it. Processed food items can cause it. Certain blood pressure medications can cause it. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs can cause it. Vitamin B3 deficiency can cause it. So there are a lot of things that can cause the villus atrophy that are not gluten. Now, when we come back to your question on peanuts, is it possible that a person has a reaction to peanuts where that protein in peanuts could damage the intestinal lining? Of course, absolutely. And if you find that you don't do well with peanuts, the best thing for you to do is avoid eating them. Now, peanuts can also contain different types of mold toxins, and so you have to be careful, in that regard, because some people are very sensitive to mold and mold toxins, and so it may not be the peanut per se; it may be mold toxins on the peanut. But yeah, I mean, peanuts could be a trigger for intestinal flattening or villus damage, no doubt about it. Can imbalance in the gut give you extreme fatigue? Yes, it can. Imbalance in your gut is. So fatigue, fatigue is not really an illness. That's why so many doctors have a hard time with like a diagnosis, because fatigue, what does that mean to a person? One person could say, I'm fatigued, and the meaning for them could be that they don't have enough energy to sustain, their get up and go throughout the day. Another person might define fatigue as, I can't think clearly, my brain is very foggy, and it's hard for me to think and do my work, right? So fatigue is kind of a perception term more than it is a specific term. But can leaky gut cause fatigue or gut imbalance cause fatigue? Yeah, for several different reasons. One, if your gut is leaking, that basically, if you want to be graphic about it, your poop is now leaking into your bloodstream and poisoning you slowly over time, and that's going to make you tired. Imbalances in the gut, depending on what kind of imbalances, remember I said earlier that certain types of microbes, if you feed them the wrong food, will cause the production of alcohol in your gut. And alcohol is a downer, right? If we're looking at classes of medicine, it's certainly not an upper, it's a downer, and that certainly could cause fatigue. Alcohol also causes B vitamin deficiency, and you need B vitamins to make energy. So certainly imbalances in the gut can cause fatigue. As far as recommendations of any kind of probiotic, there's several different kinds. I would say just as a general kind of maintenance probiotic, probably my favorite one is a product called Biotic Defense. And, you take 2 capsules of that one a day. It's just kind of a maintenance support. Now, if you have a need for a much stronger, high-powered dose, we have something called Ultrabiotic Defense that I would recommend, and that dose of that particular product is about 10 times higher. So it's not something you necessarily take on a daily basis all the time, but if you need something higher power, that would be something you could do for a couple weeks at a time. Do I have any intentions to visit and present in the UK? Maybe. I always say, people ask me to come. We have a minimum criteria, Leah, for me to make a trip, and that generally, if I'm going to travel out of my hometown, I like to have an audience of at least 100 people to make the trip, worth my while. So if you want to put something together and invite me, and you have a big crowd that you'd like to put together that would benefit from this information, reach out to my team at glutenology@gmail.com. Then yeah, we entertain the travel. Is there anything that can be done to lessen tinnitus? Sometimes B vitamins are very helpful for people, like vitamin B12 and folate, vitamin B2. That being said, sometimes not. I mean, tinnitus is a tricky one because you got to really figure out what's causing it. And for some people, B vitamin deficiency is the cause. Others, it's not. I've seen cases where tinnitus was caused by a parasite. As a matter of fact, I think we have a YouTube video with a past client of mine who was losing her hearing to such a severe degree, and she had a severe case of tinnitus that was being induced by an amoebic parasite that we found. So that's another potential possibility. So finding out what's driving it is the key in my opinion. How do I know for sure that my implants are the problem? That's a great question. So you're maybe at this place where you have an autoimmune condition, you have implants, you don't necessarily want to have them removed because that's an extensive surgery. I would do this first, Julie. Get a copy of No Grain, No Pain, read it, and apply it. And do that for a couple months. There's a phase 1 and phase 2 diet. Just go through the diet and apply it. Once you get to phase 2, stay on it for 2 solid months. If you feel better at that point, you can quit thinking about your breast implants as being a potential trigger. If you don't, now you maybe think about following up and getting you a good doctor whose practice is in a functional way. Because autoimmune disease, again, if you're talking about an autoimmune disease, has 4 primary driving issues, and breast implants being a chemical input, right? We said earlier, food, chemicals, microbial imbalances, and nutritional deficit are the 4 triggers. Well, it could be that you have, in those 4 categories, you have 20 or 30 triggers, right, that you need to discover and that you need to get under control. And then none of those triggers, it's possible that none of those triggers are your breast implants. I've had a number of people come to see me with breast implants where we never had to do anything about them because they got better by changing their diet and lifestyle and adjusting for these other factors. So start there first. Yeah, so somebody's asking about the other type of omega-3, the EPA. So there's DHA and there's EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid. If functional testing indicates the need for glutathione, glycine, however the individual responds to these with headaches, neck pain, and struggles with supplements, generally, could this be a sulfur issue? And other than supporting the liver as best as possible in the gut, would there be anything else you would look at? It's not a sulfur issue, most likely. It's most likely a mold issue in my experience. Most people that react to supplementation that's designed to help with detoxification, like glutathione and glycine, have mold in their environment. And so when they take those products, they're mobilizing the mold out of their fat cells and making themselves feel worse. So check your home for mold. Check your body for mycotoxins. What carbohydrate could I use in my grain-free, low oxalate diet? Fruit. Probably the easiest choice, William, fruit. And not going overboard with fruit either is important. Let's put a link up for William. We have a list, William. It's on Gluten Free Society. It's our oxalate breakdown. So we have an entire list of low and high oxalate foods, and we'll put that up for you so that you can go through those carbohydrate sources that are low oxalate, and hopefully you like some of them and can gravitate toward them into your diet. I know I'm gluten sensitive and need to remove grains from my diet. Should I take into account what the animals I feed were fed? Yes, you should, but not necessarily because you're going to be exposed to gluten in the meat. Now, dairy is a different matter. We haven't studied dairy, but we know that gluten passes through the dairy of humans. It's possible and plausible that it could pass through the dairy of animals. I just haven't seen anybody study that. Now, that being said, some animals eating grain, you're not going to get gluten from the muscle tissue or eating the meat from those animals. However, when you have heavy grain-fed animals, you change the fatty acid composition of the muscle tissue in those animals. And what happens is grain marbleizes the meat toward the omega-6 realm, so high levels of omega-6, high levels of arachidonic acid. Why is that not very good? Those types of fats, when they're high without opposing omega-3, lead to increases in inflammation and pain. So a lot of people with gluten issues are already in pain. They're already in a heightened sense of inflammation. So then when they trying to go gluten-free, but they're eating all this, we'll just say feedlot cattle meat, right? Or chickens that are predominantly locked in a box and fed grain. They're eating meat that's inflammatory, not because meat itself is inflammatory, but because the diets of the animals were inflammatory to the animals, and their meat was marbleized with fat that drives inflammation, and then you took that into your body and it continued to perpetuate your own inflammation. So it's not a gluten issue, but it is a biochemical issue around the fat. Friend, 25, I'm assuming you mean a male friend of 25 years of age with vitamin D of 20. I don't understand the question there. So I'll just say it like this, and just simplify it because I don't understand your question. I'm not sure what you're asking. If you're talking about vitamin D, and you're talking about a vitamin D deficiency in a human adult that does not have an advanced kidney disease or scleroderma, then the best and the safest and quickest way to correct that vitamin D deficiency is between 8,000 and 10,000 IUs per day, given orally, not necessarily sublingual. You could use a sublingual, but you don't have to use a sublingual. Just a good oral supplement, something like gluten-free D3 or liquid D3. We have both of those. But 8 to 10,000 units a day, and then have their vitamin D levels rechecked in 3 months, and make adjustments from there. Let's see here. Is glucose and fructose metabolism the same? No, they're different. There's different ways they're metabolized. And the rhetoric around corn syrup and the corn lobby will tell you that fructose is easily metabolized by the body in the same way that glucose is, and that's just not true. Glucose is broken down inside of most cells to generate and drive through a process called Krebs cycle, and that allows us to drive and generate ATP, provided we have adequate magnesium and B vitamins and other nutrients. That can happen efficiently. Fructose is metabolized in a very different way. In order to properly metabolize fructose, it's predominantly metabolized by the liver, and if you overwhelm the liver with fructose, you end up with a fatty liver. And copper is a requirement to break fructose and metabolize fructose down. And so, there's a lot of folks out there with copper deficiencies for whatever reason. And so fructose for them is even more of a poison. And then there's a lot of people out there that because they eat so much fructose have developed copper deficiency. And that's why. So Not quite exactly the same. There are differences there. So a question is coming up about the 4 tests that I recommend when trying to discover the root issues. It's not 4 tests, Jim. It's 4 categories of things. So when I say food, there are different types of immunological reactions that people can have to foods. It's not one test. It's multiple kinds of mechanisms at work there. So it's multiple types of tests, but it's one category. And this is also true of microbes. This is also true of chemicals. There are multiple types of tests that we look for chemical burden, chemical overload, or chemical reactivity. And then same thing is true with nutrition. There are tests that can do a good job measuring some nutrients, but not others. And so there are different tests that we look at, the preferential tests that we look at to be able to get to the root or the reason as to why a person or what a person might be deficient in. So it's not, so just for clarity's sake, it's not 4 simple tests that a lab has created and say, do these 4 tests and you'll have all your answers. It's a battery of tests that are put together to help us understand the different categories and the different triggers, but the methodologies are different. And it's not, again, it's not just simply 4 tests. So not a question, but maybe I can comment here. So tick bite, getting more than just Lyme tests, or getting more than just Lyme. Been exhausted ever since bites, 1 and again 2 years ago, but Lyme tests come back negative. I know there are other illnesses from them, but my PCP seems not to know. You know, the Western blot test, which is what most doctors will run to evaluate for Lyme, they're usually only accurate in the close proximity of the tick bite. So like if you, let's say you went out and you had a tick bite this week, getting a Western blot test could be very helpful because Western blot generally tends to show the issue acutely, but not over chronic exposure. There are other tests and other labs that can do a better job than just the standard Western blot. And I would encourage you to talk to your PCP. If he doesn't know, then you need to get with a functional doctor that specializes in Lyme, because there are a number of other tests that can be done that can help you understand whether or not those tick bites are why you're struggling. Got gout, but cannot afford many supplements. Please recommend the most helpful. Well, gout's a disease of the diet. It's free. You don't have to take supplements. I mean, one of the most effective supplements for gout is zinc, because the uric acid crystals that form and cause the pain with gout are broken down by an enzyme called xanthine oxidase, and that enzyme is a zinc-dependent enzyme. And so if your friend is zinc deficient, then zinc might be a really inexpensive but quite helpful supplement in that case. You know, you can get a bottle of zinc for less than $15. So even if she's, you know, working on a budget, that's one that just off the top of my head, I would say with somebody with that, I would maybe look at saying, yeah, that would be a good idea. But I'll just say the same thing I said a minute ago. Your friend should get a copy. If budget is an issue, go check it out at the library, but go get a copy of No Grain, No Pain and implement it. I see a lot of cases of gout where they get resolution with diet change. And what's funny and ironic about that is most of the dietary advice in the rheumatological world around gout is to not eat meat. I have found that to be absolutely false and not true at all, that many people with gout, it's not meat per se that is the driving force. It's the combination of poor dietary habits and poor lifestyle habits. So starting with No Grain, No Pain, that's free. Your friend could do that very easily today. Shampoo and hair conditioner may have wheat protein without any warning, very small print ingredients. Is this likely a cause for scalp irritation, itch, and burning? Yeah, it can be. I would say absolutely yes. So You know, a lot of the celiac groups, if you get online and you're doing research around celiac, they'll tell you not to worry about wheat and grain per se in like soaps or shampoos or lotions. I disagree, and clinically I've seen grain-based ingredients in soap, shampoos, and lotions lead to a lot of skin reaction in these individuals. So I think if that's what's happening to you, it's a real easy thing to change your hair care products. Yeah, so Bonnie's asking about heat-generated edema. In the winter, no problems, but in the hotter months, the hands and feet and the ankles swell. I mean, there are a number of different things that could contribute to a heat-related edema. I would want to do a full workup in a person like that, because there's not like a simple thing that I could say it's this or it's that. It's most likely an autoimmune reaction that's triggered by the stress of increased heat. And there are a lot of people that have, there's a term called dysautonomia, where their ability for their autonomic nervous system to regulate temperature effectively is somewhat hindered or diminished. And so this type of problem is generally neurological, so we'd want to go deeper in understanding it. But there's not like one simple trick or tip that I could give you in that regard, other than there's probably an autoimmune process underlining it. Do melatonin supplements dry up the sinuses? No, not typically, not in my experience or in the experience of my clients. Is it too late at the age of 68 to heal? I'm recently diagnosed with gluten issues, but I see now I have had it since childhood. No, it's never too late to heal, Diane. I mean, the only time it's too late to heal is if you believe it's too late to heal. Healing always begins in the power of your belief. If you believe you can heal, then you can. And I've had clients in their upper 90s do fantastically well with diet and lifestyle change. So and expand their life, their quality of life as a result of that. And so you're young at 68. I think never say it's too late to heal unless you're just ready to call it in. Is there a cure for chronic eustachian tube dysfunction? Depends on what's causing the dysfunction. I mean, a lot of eustachian tube dysfunction that I've seen is because of a lack of drainage. And so there's actually a simple maneuver where you can pull the ear back and away, and it opens up that eustachian tube and allows for fluid to properly drain. But I see this in a lot of kids, especially where they're eating foods that cause excessive mucus production, and it clogs their sinuses and it clogs their eustachian tube, and then they get ear infections repetitively. Boom. One time I had a pediatrician come to see me, and she was one of my neighbors in our building, and she'd struggled for years with chronic sinusitis and chronic headaches and allergies. And so I just said, sit down, and I adjusted her ear, or her eustachian tube, and within like 5 seconds she was running to the bathroom because the mucus was flooding from her tube down her throat, down the back. So she had all this mucus just unleash from her. And anyway, after that, her allergy problems pretty much dissipated, and her immune system was able to function again because her lymphatic system wasn't clogged, and her sinuses weren't breeding grounds for bacteria. But yeah, I mean, again, depending on the eustachian tube, what's causing the dysfunction. I'm a type 2 diabetic, 1 milligram of Ozempic and 1,000 milligrams of metformin, but my sugar falls to the 50s in the middle of the night. Is there something more natural I can take to lower my A1C? I think it's not what you need to take, it's what you need to do. This is the example I was giving earlier about passive therapy versus you taking action. Ozempic and metformin are passive, and they don't come without side effects and problems. I mean, one of the major problems that you're going to run into with those medications is anemia. You're going to develop B12 and folate deficiency, most likely CoQ10 deficiency. That's going to drive up your blood pressure, and ultimately it'll drive up your blood sugar. So the drug's effectiveness over time wear off. And that's probably why they added Ozempic, because you were probably originally on metformin and its effectiveness started to wear off, so they had to add the insulin mimetic to that mix. you gotta take care of the basics. Why is your blood sugar high in the first place? What's happening that is not allowing your body to burn the glucose properly, and it's getting trapped in your bloodstream? There are a number of reasons why that can happen. One of the best things that you can do is you can get on a reasonably balanced diet where your carbohydrates are being controlled more aggressively. Most people with diabetes are eating 60+% carbohydrates in your diet, in their diets. You should be, if you're a diabetic, you should eat no more than 33% of your total calories from carbs. And if you do make that transition, be careful, because the dose of your medicine may become even stronger, and so when you change your diet, you're on medicine to lower your blood sugar. What can happen is your blood sugar drops even lower, and then you get really, really tired and dizzy and can end up with a problem. But changing your diet has got to be part of your program. Changing your exercise habits, increasing your time with weight resistance. You have to build lean muscle. Lean muscle improves insulin sensitivity, probably better than anything else in the world. Lean muscle mass. You don't see diabetic bodybuilders. It's not something you see. Now, I'm not saying you got to go be a bodybuilder, but you got to build lean muscle, and that requires resistance training or resistance activities. And then beyond that, with diabetes, you've got to look at the key nutrients. Magnesium, chromium, B vitamins, vitamin D are all essential for the regulation of blood sugar. So if you're low in those nutrients, it doesn't matter how much you change your medicines, they're not going to overcome those nutritional deficits. I think we should do a crash course on diabetes. Let's put up the link. I know we have one link about, I'm going to put this up for you. It's a video called "What My Doctor Never Told Me About My Blood Sugar," and I think you'd really benefit by watching that video once we're done talking today. Why do I catch a cold or sore throat every single month this year after I had the disease that shall not be named a second time? I don't know. You probably have an immune problem, underlying immune problem. So, one of the things that I would just throw out there for you to try would be using N-acetylcysteine NAC, and use about 1,500 milligrams a day, and stay on that for a few months and see if you can get through a month without picking something up. NAC's very, very powerful at helping the immune system cope. Does the flu shot weaken the immune system? You guys are trying to get me censored again. I'll just let that comment speak for itself. You talked kidney stones, but how about gallstones and how to prevent them? Many people around me have gallbladder removed. So if you're struggling with like gallstones on a repetitive nature basis, the likelihood that your diet is wrong for you is very high, and that your liver is overwhelmed. And say the first thing you can do to slow down the production of gallstones is don't eat sugar, period. The second, don't eat grain, don't eat dairy. Beyond that, there are a number of different things that you can do. Some people do what are called gall flushes, where they use a mixture of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice with high amounts of olive oil and drink that. And what that does is it stimulates the contractions of the gallbladder to push stones out, and that can be a very effective protocol for some people. That being said, the best way to prevent stones and gallbladder problems is not to drink a bunch of oil every time you get a stone, but it's to change your diet so that it's accommodating to your health. What causes scoliosis? Is there anything that someone can take to help? Lots of things cause scoliosis, so part of it depends on the type of scoliosis that you're referring to. I mean, there are different levels of scoliosis, let's say, and some people have a 30-degree plus curve, some people have a 6 or 7 or 10-degree curve. One of the best things that you can do there's nothing you can take per se. I mean, there's not a supplement that's going to cure your scoliosis. Now, you may have some degree of your scoliosis can be exacerbated by tight muscles or imbalanced muscles, and so there are a number of nutrients that support muscular balance. And so we think about things like calcium, magnesium, CoQ10, and then we also think about things like focusing on stretching and focusing on exercises to restore balance. So scoliosis recovery requires work more than it requires something that you take. But I would suggest if you have scoliosis and you struggle, ask your doc to measure your nutritional status so that you can dial into what you might be low in that could be affecting the tone or the tightness of your muscles that are leading to or contributing to that scoliotic imbalance. What's the best email to have a follow-up question to visit with you? I mean, if you email me directly, you're not going to get a response. I get thousands of emails a week, Maria. So, I mean, if you want to set up a time to have a consultation with my office, you can call them. Or email originshealthcare@gmail.com, and they can reach out to you and talk to you about that. But if you I don't give out I don't give out my personal email, so that's probably the best one. That, and if you're looking for customer service for Gluten Free Society, you can email glutenology@gmail.com. I'm not able to digest proteins. Please recommend the best main micronutrients in the protein metabolism and better enzymes. Okay, so if you're struggling with digesting protein, there's a few things that you can try to do. Number one, there are a couple of products I would recommend. One is Ultra Digest. Ultra Digest has a blend of proteolytic enzymes that help to degrade and digest proteins. Number two is a product called Ultra Acid. And Ultra Acid is a mixture of a few different things, but one of the main ingredients is something called betaine hydrochloride. And what it does, remember, you need acid to digest proteins in the stomach. A lot of your protein digestion occurs in the stomach, and acid is a requirement to do that. And a lot of you don't have enough stomach acid or have damage to your stomach, so it doesn't produce the stomach acid it should. But those two products, and we can put a link up for you, man, Ultra Acid and Ultra Digest, those two. Dimethyl aminoethanol powder, can it be dangerous, and what are the doses to use for sagging skin? It's just not something I would recommend. Sagging skin, if you want to fix sagging skin, probably one of the best supplements that I would encourage a person to take would be collagen. The other prescription per se I would recommend is exercise. A lot of people don't realize this. When your skin starts to sag, one reason is you're not eating enough protein or not getting enough collagen, because the matrix or the basis of your skin firmness or toneness is collagen. Now, there will be some sagging with aging. You're not going to be able to prevent all the wrinkles or all the sagging indefinitely. There's no such thing as that unless you just go get a bunch of surgeries where you tighten your skin. But even then you start to look like an alien, and I don't recommend that either. But beyond that, those are just my opinions. Muscle, right? Where skin will sag is there's no muscle supporting the underlying aspect of it. And so when you age, if you're underactive, if you're not doing your part with your activity, your skin will begin to droop because there's no supportive muscle underneath it. Remember, muscle occupies space, and it creates a stretching effect or a pushing effect. So if you've got an area that's sagging, and this is true, I know a lot of women that I've seen will talk about, like when they hold their arms out, they'll have sagging skin underneath, and that's embarrassing for them to wear like a tank top or a short sleeve shirt. And the reason that skin is sagging is because, number one, there's no muscle tone in the arm, and number two, there's probably more fat than there should be. So how do you fix that, right? How do you get rid of that? No DMAE is going to do that. No, even collagen is not going to fix that. What'll fix that is physical activity. And you don't have to go kill yourself at the gym. You don't have to go build Arnold Schwarzenegger-like arms to not have sagging skin. But you have to have a commitment to physical activity in your life on a regular basis if you want to not have it. And to the largest extent, those things will work better than any pill or any cream or procedure that you could ever do in a healthy way. But you've got to keep that muscle base underneath the skin to prevent it from sagging. Let's see, Ruth's asking, can you point me to any videos you did on bone healing? I've got a great announcement on that front. We've been working on this for a while. We have a kit coming out called Ultra Bone, and the research that's been done to put this together is amazing, and it's to provide the basis for improvement of bone density. And we're very shortly going to have that available. I think probably sometime within the next month, although don't hold me to that exact time frame, but I'm excited about that. Now, that being said, we do have some videos on bone healing. We did a crash course, I believe, on bone health and bone healing that you can watch, and maybe we'll put that link up for you. Let's see, Debbie says, Dr. Osborne, which one of your GI products would you recommend for malabsorption, GERD, history of PPIs? Couple different things, just again, in general, for support. Number one would be, we have a product, depending on whether you like to swallow pills or you like powders or prefer a powder, we have a product called GI Soothe, which is in a pill form, and we have a product called GI Shield, which is in a powder form. Ingredients are relatively the same, but what this product does is it puts a coating, a mucilaginous coating down over the stomach and the upper esophagus, and the lower aspect of the stomach where it connects into the small intestine. And so if you're struggling with GERD, it might give you some symptomatic help in that regard. But that's not a long-term solution. That's just, okay, let's prevent damage to the lining, so you put a coating down. Now, beyond that, the big question is, why is that damage there? For a lot of people, that damage is actually coming from food. They're eating food they don't have the ability to digest. And so for many people, it's because they don't make enough stomach acid. It's the opposite of what a lot of doctors will say. You have acid reflux or you have too much stomach acid. Most of the time the opposite is true. You don't make enough acid. So when you eat the food's not breaking down. It's putrefying inside your stomach, damaging the lining of your stomach, creating gaps in the mucosal lining, which then get irritated by acid, and then you hurt, and then you end up on a PPI to stop the acid suppression. And so symptomatically you may feel better, but you're actually perpetuating the problem, which is you didn't have enough stomach acid to digest your food. All that being said, let's get back to the question, which product? Ultra Acid is what I would recommend, especially if you're already taking Ultra Digest. Add Ultra Acid to that, but put down a lining or a layer to protect you as you go through this process. Because ultimately, if you put down that mucilaginous layer, then the underlying cells will get a reprieve or a break from being irritated, and that might help accelerate your healing time. When intermittent fasting, can you drink black coffee only and not elevate or spike insulin? I would say typically no. And here's why. Caffeine stimulates cortisol. Cortisol stimulates the release of glucose from your liver. So even though you're not technically eating carbohydrate energy, you're actually dumping glucose into the liver, and that's glucose from the liver into the bloodstream, and that's going to spike your insulin and potentially, get in the way of a fasting goal. So if you're trying to truly fast, now some people do better even still intermittent fasting where they do have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and it's not ruining the entire effect, so to speak, but technically there is a chemical release of glucose from the liver when you stimulate when you stimulate the cortisol release with caffeine. In my opinion, is good quality meat hard on the kidneys? No, not at all. In my opinion, I think meat gets a bad rap, and it has. And I think who can we thank for that? Let's just go back in history. This is a great question. I'm going to rant on this for a minute. Who can we thank for demonizing meat? None other than Kellogg. Now, those of you who know who Kellogg is, Kellogg was the cereal guy, right? Kellogg cereal. What do they got? Frosted Flakes. That's super healthy for you, right? I don't know what are their other brands. I don't buy any of them, but this is the guy, the main guy, the turn of the century, who demonized meat. He was no offense, by the way, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, if you're part of that religion, I have nothing against you. I appreciate and respect all religions. That being said, he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and it's the belief of Seventh-day Adventists that the diet should be vegetarian. And so because of that belief, his belief, he created an entire sanatorium, if you will, around that belief, where people would come from all over, and he would feed them his cereal product. And that was kind of the health trend of the time, if you want to think about it that way. But from that came Kellogg cereal, and came the onslaught of all these processed cereals over time that have done more damage to the health of the modern world than probably outside of sugar and chemical pesticides. I would say these processed cereals have done more damage to modern health than anything else. And they demonize meat during the process, because again, the belief is that you eat whole grain, you eat vegetables and fruits and nuts, but you don't eat meat because meat's somehow bad for you. And there's never been any great science that proves this at all. There's been anecdote. There've been epidemiological studies that are completely fraudulent and wastes and not real science. But you can't show me a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial where you take people with meat and without meat and show the health impacts in a negative way, where they actually have increased risk for heart disease and heart attacks and strokes and other problems. That science doesn't exist. And as a matter of fact, there's a very robust body of literature growing right now in the medical community on meat-containing keto diets being one of the most effective ways to reverse diabetes and heart disease risk. So how do you explain that if vegetarian diets are so much better? Now, all that being said, everybody's unique and different. Some people do better with plant-based diets than others, and some people do better with carnivore-based diets than others, and then some people are kind of in the middle. They need both. I don't think we can demonize either side. I think we have to take in our own uniquenesses, our own biochemical individuality, and we have to come to the conclusion that's right for us. But to demonize meat and call it something I've had people in stage 4 kidney disease, and I've had them eat meat on purpose and bring them out of stage 4 kidney disease because they were eating enough protein again, and they could never heal from their disease because they were so protein malnourished, their body didn't know how to heal. So meat can be a very important part of kidney health. Now, can a person overdo it? Yeah, you can overdo anything, though. You can overdo any food. You can overdo any supplement. You can overdo any aspect. But I would never make a blanket statement that meat is somehow bad for kidneys or hard on kidneys. When it comes to BPH, I assume you mean benign prostatic hypertrophy. What does certain carbs like macadamia cause restricted flow? Is it hormonal? Well, macadamia is got some carb, but it's mostly fat. So, I mean, BPH, in my experience, a lot of people with prostate enlargement, non-cancerous, have yeast overgrowth. And that increases in carbohydrates can actually swell the prostate through release of chemical yeast toxins, and that's something I've seen repetitively in people that have BPH. When we test them, they have candida. We get rid of their candida, then their urinary flow improves. So that's a possibility. Chronic inflamed nodes, if you mean lymph nodes, lots of things can cause chronic inflamed lymph nodes. Eating the wrong food, being exposed to chemicals, the wrong odors in the room, people using air fragrance fresheners, I mean, there's just a number of different things that can cause swollen nodes without a fever. I had a knee surgery 6 weeks ago and my wound is not healing as it should. I'm on a carnivore diet to help my RA. What can I be missing? Yeah, so if you're not healing, this goes back to, I know there's a large audience of carnivore fans, and I can appreciate that those people have had a fantastic experience with their illness by going carnivore. And there's a lot of doctors that, make claims that the carnivore diet is more nutritious for various reasons, and they're right for some people, but they're not right for all people. And I think it's important, again, that we take a step back and say, what is right for each of us as a unique individual? And it's just been my experience that carnivore, and I've seen people do really, really well with carnivore diets, and I've seen some people do not so well with carnivore diets, and that may be who you are if you're not healing from that surgery. What I would suggest, I have a surgery recovery protocol. Can we find that? I think that's at Gluten Free Society. We'll put that up for you. Start there. These are nutritional supplements that I've used clinically for 22 years to help people post-surgically. I used to run a rehab clinic, and this was the protocol that we would use when they would go in for knee surgery or back surgery or whatever it might be, and we would want to make sure that they were going to heal, because one of the complications of surgery is when a person's malnourished, they have failed surgery syndromes. So we can put that up for you and I'd start there, but I would consider that because you're on what we would consider to be a restrictive diet in some ways, get your nutritional status checked as soon as possible. Get with your doctor and ask them to measure your vitamin and mineral status so that you can know, because there may be other key nutrients that you're missing that are preventing your healing from occurring. But try that post-surgical protocol. It's designed, and we've tested it, and my patients would heal 2 to 3 times faster than people not doing it. And so you can start with that and see if that's helpful for you. I'd like to try proteolytic enzymes besides my digestive enzymes. When's the best time to take them? Okay, so if you're trying to use proteolytic enzymes for its, inflammation, anti-inflammation properties, or for its blood rheological properties, the best time to take them is on an empty stomach. So that's going to be ideally 2 hours after a meal, or ideally at least 1 hour before eating. And so get those in you so that they absorb systemically. Otherwise, if you take it too close to food, it'll just help you digest your food. Is there an enzyme that breaks down oxalates in food so I can eat them? Not really. Acid, a lot of people do well with like lemon water or citrus water. It helps to dissolve and break up oxalate crystal. Good bacteria, having good microbe balance. Lactobacillus bifidobacter can break down oxalates, so a good probiotic might be beneficial for you in that way as well. But one of the other things to consider if you're struggling with the oxalate issue, aside from just changing your diet, is to suspect that you have a yeast overgrowth or an environmental mold problem. Those are areas where I see people really, really have high oxalates when we measure them. A lot of times they're either in mold or they have mold in them. And in both cases, oxalate can become a problem. My IgG levels came back raised, but nothing has been mentioned why, and told not food related. What does raised IgG mean? Oh man, you got a CRP over 92. You're inflamed. You're doing something wrong. IgG is a general antibody that circulates through the bloodstream, and it's protective. So there's something that you're doing that's causing you to make more IgG in an effort to try to protect you from what it is that you're doing. And when your CRP is as high as 90, I mean, that's sky high. That means you're inflamed. So something you're eating or being exposed to is probably the driving factor behind both of those things. And if your doctor's telling you it has nothing to do with food, you might want to get a second opinion. Please talk about Candida. I tell you what, because we're running out of time, and I got a meeting I have to hit here in just a few minutes. So the question, Mary's asking a question about recovering from Candida. I have a pretty lengthy video on that, Mary. I'm going to put that up for you. And what I want you to do is just go watch it. And if you don't get the exact answers that you're looking for, make sure you come back next week and we'll take care of you. Higher level of arthritic pain after starting a grain-free diet. Been taking methotrexate injection for years. What can I do? So some people that have kind of a transient increase in pain after starting no grain, no pain, it's because they've removed the grain. Part of the gluten protein breaks down. It's cleaved into a morphine-like protein that actually has pain diminishing effects. You know, you think morphine's an opiate, and the gluten substrate proteins can mimic morphine. This is why some people get addicted to bread or get addicted to carbs. And you may be having some of that happen where your pain levels are going up because you've removed that morphine-like protein from your diet. If you're having more pain, I mean, there are a number of things that you can do. Again, I would look at the potential that you're also reacting to other foods, Dion. So getting tested for food sensitivities beyond grain, beyond gluten. You can do that. If your doctor won't do it, go to Gluten Free Society. We offer a food sensitivity lymphocyte response assay that's very accurate in helping you to kind of understand what other foods might be driving that inflammation and thus helping your pain, or not helping your pain rather. And then the other thing I would recommend that maybe you consider doing is a lot of people, when they're initially going grain-free, they're very malnourished, and so recovering from pain is already hard enough. So consider high-dose omega-3 supplementation, 2 to 3 grams a day to start. Consider 5 grams a day of vitamin C. Consider 2 grams a day of quercetin. We have something called Ultra Q. That's a high-dose, 1,000 milligram per capsule quercetin. These are all things that can help as you're navigating through the diet and waiting for it to kick in and waiting for that gluten to get out of your system. Remember, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get the gluten out of your system. And so I don't know how long you've been on a grain-free diet, but sometimes you got to be patient with it. What can be done to support the brain of a full-time student after long hours of studying? Sleep. There's no better medicine than sleep for somebody who's tired. A lot of people want to use nootropics, caffeine. I'm just not a big fan of those things and create addiction. A lot of college kids today are on Adderall or other drugs, and when they get out of college, they're so addicted to these medicines they can't function in society without them, and they've created a bigger problem than what they should have. Sleep, number one thing that you can do, and eat well. You got to eat solid. Your brain needs fuel, and if you inflame it with the wrong fuel, it's not gonna think well. And if you put it under pressure, it's gonna cave on you. Oh, I like that comment. Dahlia was just talking to Dion about her arthritic pain and being on the grain-free diet, and she said look into oxalates if you replace grain with almond flour. Yeah, that's a really good comment, Dahlia. So Dion, I would take that advice. My thoughts on carob, I don't like it. I don't eat it. Some people like it and eat it and tolerate it just fine. Carob is a bean that tastes somewhat like chocolate. So when people are looking for chocolate substitutes, oftentimes they gravitate toward carob, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But again, that's my own personal opinion. My son has awful acid reflux. What can he do to help? He's got to look at his diet. I mean, most acid reflux is diet induced. So we've got to look at what he's eating and see if what he's eating is a trigger for his issue. Yeah, Cindy says, can you please tell us what education you have? Yeah, I have an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and I have a doctorate degree in chiropractic. I am also a doctor of pastoral science, and I am a diplomate with the American Clinical Board of Nutrition, which is a 3-year postgraduate doctoral program, federally recognized. It's the only board certification for docs, for postdocs, in clinical nutrition that exists. So it's very similar to the type of program that you might see your internal doctor or your orthopedic doctor, where they go to additional schooling to become board certified. The ACBN is the only federally recognized entity that board certifies postgraduate doctors in clinical nutrition. So those are all aspects of my education. Hopefully that's helpful for you. I wonder if the long-term inflammation deteriorates cartilage. Maybe, so that's not a question, a comment. What causes the buzz or intoxication-like feeling after eating bread? Yeah, that's morphine. Gluteomorphin is the name of the protein that's broken down from gluten that can lead to that type of sensation, that euphoric happiness and feel good. Somebody's asking about making a video on ankylosing spondylitis. I have an article on that on Gluten Free Society. I think the title is Gluten Caused Back Pain, something along that line. For blood thinner, tocotriene. Okay, so that's not a question. What is the optimal blood sugar number? If you're talking about fasting blood glucose, you know, between 60 and 90 is really generally considered pretty normal in a fasted state. Is it okay to eat potatoes? If you're not allergic to them, it's okay to eat them. They're not, if you're trying to be gluten grain free, they are gluten grain free. Some people don't do well with nightshades. Potatoes are a nightshade and it can contribute to joint pain for some. But again, it just depends on who you are as a person. Where most people go wrong with potatoes is the mechanism by which they're prepared or cooked. You know, when you fry them, you create compounds that are carcinogenic, and you destroy the nutrient quality, and you add rancidified fat to the food that isn't good for you. And some people just overconsume them. You know, you can eat too many for sure. And then some people lather their potatoes with, you know, artificial butter and all kinds of sauces that contain fructose corn syrup, ketchup. You know, but potatoes in general, organic potatoes are okay. Let's keep going down. Yeah, a lot of general questions that are hard to answer. So, is it possible to have rheumatoid arthritis or Sjogren's even if your blood work comes back negative? Yeah, Dahlia, there's something called seronegative rheumatoid arthritis, and you can have the symptoms of Sjogren's even if your ANA comes back negative. Again, these diagnoses are the criteria to make the diagnosis of arthritis, rheumatoid, and Sjogren's are not 100% objective criteria. Some of the criteria are subjective. And so it's possible to receive that diagnosis. It depends on which rheumatologist that you're visiting. I mean, I've seen several cases of patients who have what are called seronegative RA or rheumatoid arthritis, where you know, the rheumatoid factor is normal, but they have high CRP, high ESR, and they have the symptoms that emulate rheumatoid arthritis. In many of those cases, the reason, there are various different reasons why that disease happens, but in many of those cases, gluten is a major culprit. My last lab test said my neutrophils were low. Could you tell me what that means? Neutropenia is caused by a number of different things, but generally speaking, it's a form of anemia, and so if we're talking about nutrition, Patty, B12 deficiency could cause it, folate deficiency could cause it, a chronic infection or chronic immune exposures are oftentimes reasons why we'll see the neutrophil counts being low. So like a person that has chronic Lyme, or a person that has like a chronic Klebsiella or Pseudomonas issue. These are, again, just various reasons why they could be low. I dig into all of those. Panelist says, I'm carnivore. No matter what I eat, I'm so sleepy afterward, can't figure it out. It's okay to be sleepy after you eat. I think that one of the things that as a society that we do is we try to eat on the go, right? And we don't honor what the body needs when the Spanish culture, the Mexican culture has the term siesta, right? And Italians do it too. My dad lives in Italy. When I visit, it's very normal to take a nap after the meal. Now, for those of you that have severe heartburn when you lie down, that maybe isn't the best idea, but it's normal to become sleepy after eating, because what happens is your nervous system redirects your blood flow away from your head, away from your brain to a certain extent, and it's sending blood to your guts, to your intestines. Because why? Because you just ate a meal and your body's trying to digest that meal, and that requires the resources that the blood will deliver to the tissue. So being a little snoozy after a meal is pretty normal, and honor it. Take a cat nap and get refreshed and let your food digest. So many people try to work when they're trying to digest, and it's like two opposing mechanisms, and then they get frustrated with themselves. And that frustration just leads to a lot of different issues. Is it best to go with dietary changes in vitamin and mineral supplements prior to adding enzymes for optimal health? I'd say it's best to do possibly even all of those things if those things are necessary and have been found necessary for an individual. I think a lot of that just depends on, if you've had testing done, what your testing shows. Should one eat fat, carbs, and protein together, or better portioned? I'd say a person with good, healthy, robust digestion should be able to tolerate eating all three. But people who are digestively challenged or weakened sometimes do better when they kind of portion out what they're eating. So eating protein away from carbs or protein away from fat, although inherently you can't, it's somewhat impossible to eat only protein unless you're just taking supplements, because when you eat meat, there's fat in the meat. When you eat nuts, there's protein and fat in the nuts. When you eat carbs, there's generally, depending on the carb, if it's a vegetable, there's generally protein and carbohydrates present, and sometimes even fat. So it's not like one food contains only one macronutrient. Oxalates can go, okay, Ruth, okay, so they're knocking on my door here telling me I've got to go. So we're going to wrap it up. We stayed a little longer, took care of you guys. Make sure you come back next week. We'll be here Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for a great show. And then again on Thursday at 12:30 Central Time for another Q&A. And make sure you visit our sponsor, Gluten Free Society. What was our promo code again? Digest?
Yes.
Yeah, use promo code DIGEST and you'll save some money if you're wanting to check out some of our digestive enzyme products. And we will, again, like I said, we'll see you back next week. And make sure, if you enjoyed this content, help us reach more people. We've had our fair share of censorship, and with your help, we can break through it. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not already, and hit the share button if you think this will help somebody that you love, because together we're going to save 100 million lives. We'll see you next week.